Good morning, everyone. This is Rich Rouser from Pentegra. We're going to start our webcast in just a minute or two. We're a little bit early, but give us just another moment or two. Good morning, everyone. Rich Rouser again from Pentegra. Today's topic is one of our thought leadership pieces, which is the Pentegra SmartPath. And just to give you a little bit of background regarding SmartPath, a couple of years ago, we started to do some critical thinking about what I call the retirement plan of the future. And what I mean by that is, what should the typical 401k savings plan look like 3 to 5 years down the road? And part of this initiative was to kind of get behind things and start to move our clients in the direction of practical best practice plan design, and really to get them to the stage of where I think the future of retirement 401k plans are going to be in terms of plan design. So, part of the genesis of this whole project was to do a number of what I call employee roundtables. And these were really intergenerational roundtables where we had everything from the youngest generation to the oldest generations at the table. And we asked the group some critical questions about work, about life, and about work-life balance, and right on through everything from healthcare to retirement plans. And some of the questions that we asked them were, what did they want? What did these employees want from their employer? What did they expect from their employer? And the findings were pretty interesting, as a matter of fact. And some of the things that we're going to talk about today, actually most of the things that we're going to talk about today, came out of these roundtables. And the interesting thing is the younger generations, we found through these discussions, need and want guidance and help from their employer regarding their 401k plan. They need and want help regarding enrolling in the plan, setting their savings rate, increasing contributions over time, and even with the investment side of the equation. So, what we did is we went back to the drawing board and we said, well, what are the tools that we have available, and how do we incorporate those into the typical employer plan that we provide services to? So that was kind of level one of where we started with this whole thing. We'll talk towards the end of some additional things that we've been doing since then, but for today we're going to walk through the basics, and today's discussion really is geared towards how should an employer design their plan, what should they be doing, what should they be thinking about, and they should also be thinking through what are the impacts to employees, and what are the goals that we're trying to accomplish. So with that background, one of the things that's critical in terms of plan design is measuring success. And, really measuring success is really a function of how well does the plan help the participant meet their needs? How well does it gear them and set them up for a successful retirement? How does it fill the gaps, and how does it work for them to their maximum advantage over the long haul? That's really the key to the whole equation here. Automatic features, I mentioned this earlier. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things in terms of automatic features. A lot of this came out of the Pension Protection Act a number of years ago, but some of the concepts we'll talk about today are making it easy to participate in the plan. We'll talk about vesting schedules and the impacts that they have on employees, online enrollment, setting automatic savings rates, and why a higher deferral rate is better than a lower deferral rate, and some of the other features that you can see that we've got mapped out on this screen here. So we'll touch on a lot of these today and walk you through it. So the first topic is making it easy to participate. And what we've done here is we've kind of broken this down by adoption rates everything from small employers to large employers. And, part of the intent here is to show you what I think are the trends in the industry and where things are going. And this will really, help frame it and support the cause here. But, making it easy to participate and enabling participants to come into the plan relatively soon after they're hired is really one of the key metrics that makes a plan valuable to employees. Many years ago, employers used to make employees wait a year, my gosh, to come into the 401k plan to start saving their own money. Nowadays, it's more likely that there's less than a 1-year requirement. Now, on this chart, you can see the large employers out there, 1,000 or more, or even 200 or more employees. Upwards of 2/3 to almost 80% of them are permitting employees to come in immediately, essentially, as soon as maybe the first of the month following their date of hire. Now, you can see on the small end of the spectrum, small employers are not necessarily in the same camp. It's only 38 to 44% with the immediate eligibility, and you can see that many of them are dragging out eligibility for a period of 3 or 6 months, or some of them even still upwards of a year. So again, eligibility in a plan, allowing somebody to come in, does a couple of things. Number one, it enables them to continue to start saving their own money, which they might have been doing already, or probably have been doing already, maybe at a prior employer. Number two, you don't necessarily have to start matching the employee contribution right out of the gate. You could actually delay that for up to a year after they're on board. So, you don't necessarily have to marry the matching concept with opening up and liberalizing eligibility in your plan. So the trend is there, and the trend is being led by the large employers who typically have more flexible or more favorable eligibility periods and allow people to come into the plan relatively soon. In terms of vesting schedules, and again, I think everybody knows this, vesting means you own something or have a right to something. The best vesting schedules, obviously for employees, are schedules that vest them more fully earlier on in the process. So you can see from this chart, anywhere from 31% to almost 50%, not quite, allow full and immediate vesting, which is obviously very, very favorable. Now, if I look at the larger employers, again, 1,000 lives and above, kind of the right-hand side of this chart, you'll see some of them, have vesting going out for maybe a 3-year period of time. There's a little bit of a blip again at the 5-year level, but compare that to the left-hand side where small employers, you've got almost a third of them with a 6-year graded vesting schedule. The industry trend has been to shorten the vesting schedules, and the psychology of the plan participant, though, if they're not going to be vested for 3 years, and there is a 3-year cliff vesting schedule, that meaning zero vesting until they've been there for 3 years, there's really no incentive for the employee in many cases to think about participating in the plan. And part of the reason you want to have participants in the plan is, number one, once they start contributing and it binds them to the organization, you're likely to start to reduce turnover rates and things of that nature if you can kind of get them to step up and participate in the plan. And you're right, you start to give them some matching dollars, but again, the psychology of the participant is if they're not vested in the match for some period of time, it's almost as if you're not even making the match. It has little to no value to them, at least in their mind. So shortening vesting schedules, or if you're at a 3-year cliff, maybe consider 1/3 in year 1, 2/3 in year 2, and 100% in year 3. Accelerate it somewhat, and that will drive participation rates to a degree. And I think it tends to drive reduction in turnover rates is another critical aspect of things here. Automatic enrollment. Now, this is something that is adopted by every plan, literally every new piece of business that we take over from another provider. It's kind of one of the things that we walk those employers through in terms of what are the benefits of doing this. So auto enrollment basically looks at a new participant, looks at the eligibility requirements in your plan, and auto enrolls them when they're eligible. So a couple of things about automatic enrollment. Number one, it's kind of the hands-off approach from the employee standpoint. Number two, there is always strong communication up front. Whenever we're auto enrolling somebody in the plan, they always have the option to opt out. Statistics show us that we get 80 to 90% of those people staying in the plan and just kind of going along with the flow, and that's really a good thing long-term for that employee. One of the industry-wide flaws that I see with auto enrollment is, the typical auto enrollment rate, salary deferral savings rate, is typically set at around 3% of pay. I know we've got another slide coming up with some of the details, but quite honestly, I strongly advise against that. You should really be setting that at a 5 or 6% of pay level, and the logic behind that is twofold. Number one, even the people who voluntarily sign up for your plan, right, are typically starting at a 5 or 6 or 7 or even an 8% of pay rate, not at 3%. That's typically what we see for people who voluntarily enroll in the plan. By setting the bar at only 3% for new hires, again, 80+% of the people are just going to go with the flow, and whatever you do for them is where they're going to be. Start at the 5 or 6% of pay level, which truly is where I think it should be and where it would satisfy the best need. And again, employees can always opt out of that feature, as they go through the process. But again, the trend is here to do auto enrollment in the plan. Here's the whole concept of the 6% versus the 3% salary deferral rate. And again, the chart, the stats on the chart, you can see across the board here, 47% for overall is, for those plans that use this feature are using that 3% rate, which I don't think really is the right rate. And I think the trend as we go through the years here is going to be to install a higher rate there because, again, participants can move up or down from whatever auto enrollment rate that you use at the onset. So another feature that's important to talk about is an auto escalation feature, meaning a way to automatically increase a participant's salary deferrals over time. These are typically set at a 1 or 2% rate. They typically will be set to cap out at no more than 10% of pay. So, in my hypothetical auto enrollment structure where somebody comes in at 6% of pay, that person a year down the road would auto escalate to a 7% salary savings rate and then 8%, 9%, 10%, and it would kind of stop there. So what we're trying to get to, and kind of the bogey that most participants should shoot for, is to have a savings rate between 10 and 15% of pay, because that's really the total kind of number that most employees are going to need in order to fill the gap for retirement purposes. So if an employee is getting up to the 10% of pay savings rate, and if that employer is making a matching contribution of, let's say, 50% on the first 6% of pay, well, right off the bat, they've got 13% savings rate right there, which is, right in the middle of what I call the sweet spot in terms of total retirement savings. So the goal long-term, again, this is certainly the goal for an employer that doesn't have any other retirement plan, no defined benefit plan or no employee stock ownership plan or anything like that. So if the 401k is the sole retirement vehicle, 10% to 15% of pay is really the bogey that most of the employees ought to be shooting for. So the auto escalation feature enables them to get there. One other thought on auto escalation. Many plans have a voluntary auto escalation feature where the employee can go in and put an escalator of their own in of 1 or 2 or 3% of pay, whatever they choose. That's great, but here's the problem. I'd rather see that from a plan design standpoint, because the reality is most participants just don't proactively go in and use that kind of a bell and whistle on their own. All right. So again, I think it's best to have that built into the plan design. On this slide, we're talking about getting creative with a matching contribution. By and large, most employers are doing a match of 50% on 6% of pay. There are some others that are doing more generous. We see a small minority of plans doing 100% of the first 6% of salary. We also see some other matching schedules that tie more into the 401k safe harbor rules. For example, 100% on the first 3% of pay plus 50% on the next 2. So somebody doing 5% of pay or more is getting a 4% of pay match. So, somewhere in that sweet spot of at least 50 on 6 or a bit better is the typical matching contribution we see nationwide. Obviously, that varies a bit by region of the country. It varies a bit, obviously, by industry. And it also varies based upon the general economy, quite honestly. We see it moving up and down based upon economic factors, too. But again, if the 401k is the sole employee retirement plan, some level of employer matching contribution is definitely a desirable feature in the plan. Again, here's a little bit of stats on the safe harbor matching formulas. So for those plans that have a safe harbor matching feature, we do see a small minority in the small to mid market with an automatic enrollment feature coupled to that. But again, I think the trend you can see from the larger plans, more of them have the auto enrollment feature bundled in with the safe harbor match. So there's going to be kind of a trickle-down impact to the small to medium-sized employers in terms of some of these plan design features and options. Adding a Roth 401k feature, if your plan doesn't have one, it really should have one. Again, from these stats here, and we've done this adoption rate breakdown by participant size. It's 50% to 2/3 of the employers that have this feature. That's too low, quite honestly. There's a Roth feature that's available in 401k savings plans. There are no income limitations that apply to it. So unlike a regular Roth IRA that has all sorts of tricky rules, to me this is a heck of a lot cleaner. You won't get a lot of people adopting and utilizing the feature, but quite honestly, even if you get a handful of people, what you want to do is provide a plan that permits and provides maximum flexibility to each individual participant. I'm not today going to go through the pros and cons, so to speak, and mostly pros of using a Roth feature, but contrary to popular belief, it's not just for people who are quote-unquote in a relatively low tax bracket now who expect to be in a higher tax bracket later. That's the classic example. It can actually be utilized effectively for individuals in much, much higher tax brackets who are not necessarily looking for the tax rate arbitrage that a younger employee might be looking for. So anyway, if your plan doesn't have it, you should try to put that in. You should advocate for it. If you don't have direct control over your plan, it's a hugely valuable feature to quite a few people. Leakage. In the industry, retirement plan industry, leakage is really defined as plan assets, retirement plan assets that don't make it for the long haul, that the participant either takes out as a loan or the participant takes out as a hardship distributions and spends the money and never replaces the money in the plan, or a participant changes jobs and takes the money out and buys a boat or a car, and doesn't use the money long term for retirement. So, one of the goals for an employer is to do a little bit of a balancing act on leakage. Number one, designing the plan in a way that doesn't, entice employees to just, make a withdrawal from their 401k account or 401k plan to go on vacation. On the other hand, it's critical to allow some flexibility because it's impossible to tell a young employee, a 25-year-old, hey, we'd like you to start saving in our 401k plan, and by the way, you can't touch the money for 40 or 45 years. So allowing a loan feature with no more than one outstanding loan at any one time would be an ideal plan benefit structure. You can see from this chart, most employers are limiting to 1 or 2 loans outstanding at any one point in time. A small minority of employers are allowing others. If your plan is allowing more than 1 or 2 loans outstanding at any one point in time, you ought to think about changing the plan provisions to tighten that up a little bit. Anyway, leakage, again, keeping the money available for retirement really is in the best interest of the plan participants. In terms of plan investments, we'll talk about a couple of things on the investment spectrum. We say less is more. Over the years, if I roll back 20 years or more, a typical plan might have had 3 investment choices a stock fund, a bond fund, and maybe a stable value fund. Then that grew to maybe 8 or 9 choices, 8 or 9 asset classes that were added to the mix. And then it really ballooned up. We've seen plans come in or out there with 70 investment options, with 5 equity funds that are large cap, but different styles or different managers, so to speak. Quite honestly, that many funds leads to tremendous participant confusion. It leads to paralysis by analysis or just a frightful menu of choices. So the trend these days is to pare down the number of funds to a handful of core funds, meaning covering 8 or so asset classes, and then a range of managed funds or target date funds that are better suited to put a pre-mixed, fully diversified portfolio together for participants in a one-fund solution, if you will. So again, the trend, and you can see the trend a little bit here on this slide, with larger employers have definitely fewer funds on their menus than smaller employers. So again, that's worth a look to try to tighten up that aspect of the plan. QDIA, Qualified Default Investment Arrangement, basically, again, is a one-fund investment solution. Target date funds fit in this realm. Asset allocation funds, meaning funds that are either conservative, moderate, or more aggressively balanced and designed, are other choices. Managed funds are another solution here. But enabling, and again, we see most plans with some sort of a solution out there already. But to me, it's critical because, in our findings, 80% of the participants out there need and want help with the investment side of the equation. They need somebody to help them put together a diversified, well-balanced portfolio. They need solutions that are easy and that help them attain their goals. And these types of investments help them get them where they need to be. In terms of re-enrolling, re-enrolling basically is a way to kind of shake up your plan and to put some energy into it, quite honestly. Re-enrolling is basically going to all of the participants in your plan who are already eligible, and that would include employees who are already participating and saving in the plan, as well as employees who have elected not to save any money in the plan. And a re-enrollment would kind of go through a couple of prongs of some of the features we've talked about already. Number one, if the employee, for example, wasn't saving at least 6% of salary, it would go in and say, okay, we're going to re-enroll you in the plan and we're going to reset your salary savings rate to 6% of salary. And if that employee is not is not set up with an auto escalation feature, we're going to put in a 1% auto escalation feature that takes their 6% to 7% and 8% and so on over the next couple of years. If their investments are not already in a QDIA, meaning a target date fund or a managed account, we basically say, okay, we're going to reset all of your existing money plus future money into the appropriate fund. Now, I know all that stuff that I just mentioned sounds pretty scary, that you're going to go in and mess with people's savings rates and investments. But number one, whenever you do a re-enrollment, you're doing a couple of things. Number one, we're communicating effectively. We're telling employees what's going to happen. We're going to talk to them and tell them why it's happening. We're going to give them plenty of advance notice, number one, and we're going to give them the ability to opt out of any of these changes. Right? So, for example, if I was saving 5% of pay and I didn't want to go to 6%, I would just opt out of that. Leave me alone. Leave me at 5% of pay. But on the other hand, if I was okay with you moving my existing balances into a target date fund, that's fine. If I didn't want the auto escalation at 1%, I could say, well, put me at 2% or put me at 0. So again, among those couple of prongs that I mentioned, re-enrolling gets the employee in a position where they're rethinking something that they maybe probably should have thought about over the years anyway. The problem we face, and we see it all the time in this environment, is employees set it and forget it. They started in the plan many years ago. They started savings. They started dumping money, into a fund. Don't know why they chose the fund. They probably couldn't tell you why they chose the funds that they're in. We've seen people with 10% of their money going into each of 10 target date funds, which logically makes no sense at all. They thought they were diversifying, but they kind of misunderstood the concept of how that works. So anyway, long story short, it kind of shakes it up. It enables people to opt out of what you're doing, but number one, it's going to get people to pay attention to what they're doing and how this is going to happen. Now, I want to just take a half a step back. Early in this discussion, I mentioned the intergenerational roundtables that we did. One of the things that we asked at every step of this is, of each of the generations, how would you feel if your employer took certain actions? How would you feel if you were auto-enrolled in the plan? How would you feel if your savings rate was set at 6%? Same thing with automatic escalation and so on. So by and large, the younger generations overwhelmingly applauded the efforts, and they went even further. They actually said, not only do we want this kind of thing from our employer's plan, we expect it. We want and need the help. So again, asking that same question among the older generations, they were less inclined to say they were thrilled about it, because quite honestly, most of them had been in qualified plans and 401k for many, many years. Most of them, more of them, I should say, understood how it worked and understood the importance of saving. So even though they got it, or got it more so than the younger generations, they weren't dramatically opposed to the idea, because the whole notion is they could opt out of any of the automatic features. But there was definitely, and I'll tell you this, the older generations, there was definitely a little bit more pushback in terms of, yeah, we don't really need these automatic features, and I don't really see a lot of value. But here's the real dilemma, and the dilemma goes a couple of ways here. Number one, the people who need and want the help are typically the younger generations, and they're screaming for the help. You may not hear it in your organizations, but trust me, they are. And they're going to endorse and embrace the help that you give them by putting these auto features in the plan. The older generations, yeah, there's a few of them that might be, quote unquote, a little bit miffed, but again, if we're handling the communication aspect of these things up front, they shouldn't really have an issue with it. And quite honestly, they're going to opt out. Some of them, 20% of them anyway, will probably opt out and do their own thing anyway. So, the issue that we see, and again, is, typically when we meet with management, no surprise, they tend to be a bit older than the younger generations in their plan. And one of the common responses we get is, I don't want to step on the toes of my employer. I'm sorry, my employees. I don't want to. Okay. Here we're changing. Okay. I don't want to step on their feet. I don't want to step on their toes. I don't want to annoy them, so to speak. But realistically, I think the answer is you have to take these actions. You kind of have to redesign the plan to be the best it can be, to serve the needs of the greater good of your employees. And, again, the trends in the larger plans is to move in this direction, to kind of move through effective plan redesign and do the best thing for the employees who need and want the help. I don't know if there are any questions coming up. We're going to be concluding in just a minute or two. But again, the initiative here was to design the best possible plan for your employees over the long run. I'd be happy to take questions if anybody has any questions. And again, the trends, I think, in the industry are going to be in the same direction, where more and more plans are going to be adopting more and more of these automatic features. The only other, point I'd like to make is, even if your plan doesn't have all of these automatic features, the real thing here is many of them can be adopted by the individual. Individuals can go in and auto-escalate and reset their investment elections to QDIAs and things of that nature. So again, there's individual action that can be taken in order to accomplish this at the individual level. But again, it's best if it's baked in from the plan design. With that said, we're going to conclude the webinar this morning. There is a copy of the presentation out there. There's a link on your dashboard that you'd be able to get a copy of this presentation. Obviously, if you want to follow up with us with any questions, feel free to give us a call. We're happy to do that. Thanks again for your time, everyone. Have a great day.